So, yesterday we dined with a vet. Today's Father's Day, and I'm taking a break. Father's Day is a pretty rough day. We're going to throw a little life story deal in here. Tell you guys about my father. My father, which lost my father a few years ago, and anyone who just watched the life story videos knows about when I was 6, 7 years old, when I was mad at my dad because I wasn't getting to go with him to the salvage yard. He was taking my mom to work. He rode off on his motorcycle, and I'm a little kid standing in the driveway crying, and I said, God, I hope you die. Every kid's done it to his parents at some point or another, but very few kids right after that, the next time they see their dad, he's in ICU. Because my dad got hit head on in his lane on a motorcycle, broke his back, crushed his leg, screwed him up pretty bad. So I lived with that my whole life, and a lot of the shit that I did in my past was based on I wouldn't leave my dad's side. So whatever he did or whatever I needed to do is what I did, which turned me into the person that I used to be. But my dad was a racer, and he was self-taught at everything he done, just like I am. And my dad was a hard man. He's a very, very hard man. He was hard on all us boys, but his boys were everything to him. His boys were his whole world. No matter how hard he was on us, it was still all about his boys. But my dad was paralyzed from the chest down when he was in the hospital for a couple years, and when they wanted him to buy a wheelchair, he said, "I don't need a wheelchair. I'm gonna walk out of here." And the doctor said, "No, you're not, Mr. Goad. Your spine's been crushed. You have Harrington rods holding your back together. Your left leg's been crushed. We've had to put it all back with pins and blah, blah, blah." And he tells the doctor, he said, "Doc, you a betting man?" And the doctor said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because if you are, I'm going to get in your ass pocket. I'm walking out of here." So, funny thing is, even before my dad could walk out of there, that 65 Chevy pickup with the 427 that you guys have heard me talk about on previous videos, he had a friend of his bring that truck up there and bring him a stick about that long, and he wanted to go home one weekend, and he got in that truck and drove that truck with a stick all the way home from Tulsa to where we lived at I don't remember where we lived back then, Pryor, something like that, Pryor. So my dad was a hardhead. I come by it honestly. I come by the way that I am honestly, because as I've gotten older, I've realized that I'm a lot more like my father than I ever wanted to admit. But through all of this, when my dad and I were estranged because he had his way of doing things, I had my way of doing things, and we butted heads. So when we parted, and we parted while I was in prison, when I got out, I came to see him, and he asked me something that I'm not going to tell you guys that kind of killed me. It broke my heart, and I decided right then that I was going to move on with my life and never go back to the life that I had before. So the question he asked me was wanting me to get back involved in something that I just got out of prison for. So I'm saying my dad before his accident was a solid dude. But when his accident came and he got involved in drugs, and there's just a lot of things that happened in our life, some things that couldn't be controlled and some things that could have been controlled. But at the end of the day, he and I, we kind of separated. And of course, when my dad, I'm gonna quit calling him my father, when my dad becomes sick, he'd go to the hospital, and that time, he's not gonna make it out of the hospital, and I'd swallow my pride, I'd go see him, and then of course, he'd come out of it. But one time, matter of fact, the last time that I went to see him in the hospital, he pulled me in there, all my brothers were outside, and when I got there, he wanted to talk to me. And he told me, he said, "I want you to make me a promise. I want me to give you your word right now that anything happens to me, you take care of your mother." I said, "Okay." I said, "No matter what, something happens to you, take care of mom. He said, absolutely. He said, you give me your word right now, because he knew I wouldn't break my word. He said, give me your word. And I said, you have my word. But with that comes this. I will do whatever's best for mom, even if it means putting you down. And he said, I understand. You just take care of your mom. When you walk out that door, you gave me your word. Don't break your fucking word to me, boy. Take care of your mother. So a few years later, you know, I'd heard now my dad paralyzed from the chest down and was probably 275, 280 pounds when he died. So my mom, you know, he'd have my mom get him. He got to the point that he couldn't walk on his canes anymore. Now, my dad got paralyzed in 1979. He had died a few years ago. So for a long time, my dad dealt with that. But the last few years of his life, you know, he couldn't get around as well as he used to. So my mom would have to pick him up, pull him out of the chair, or pull him out of bed, put him in his chair. Then he'd come in the living room, and 10 minutes later, he wanted to go back to bed. And it was wearing my mom out. My mom physically couldn't handle it no more. And then one day he got pissed off at her and, you know, screamed and hollered and all that shit because she wasn't doing something, getting him out of bed or something fast enough. But anyway, I'd heard these stories. I told my mom, I said, whenever you're done, you let me know and I'll step in. And one day she calls me crying and she said, I just can't do it no more. And he was actually in the hospital. And she said, I just can't do it no more. I physically can't take care of him. So I went to the hospital to see my dad and to tell him what was fixing to happen. I had my attorney go get me a guardianship over him, and I was his guardian. So when I went to the hospital, you know, I was talking to him. I said, you remember about a year ago when you made me give you my word that I would look out for mom no matter what? He said, yeah, you better keep your word. And I said, I am keeping my word. And I said, that's what I'm here to tell you. I'm not going to backdoor you with it. I'm not going to blindside you with it. I'm telling you straight up, man to man, face to face. You're not going back home. You're going to an assisted living home. And my dad's hot. You guys think I'm hot-headed? I'm like Gandhi compared to my dad. He blew a gasket. He went to you. I'm going home. I said, listen, you said do what's best for mom. Mom can't take care of you no more. She can't pick you up. She can't do this. And this shit you riding her ass all the time. I said, that's got to end. And he said, well, I'll fucking divorce her. Well, you do whatever you got to do, but I'm telling you what's fixing to happen. You're going to a home from here. So he did go to a home, and after that, of course, we didn't speak and I told my brothers, you know, my brother said, you shouldn't take on all this. And I said, well, here's the thing. He and I are already estranged. We fucked each other our whole lives. So at the end of the day, he's going to die hating somebody. It might as well be me. So I dealt with the nursing homes, and don't get me wrong. My dad gave every one of them people the blues. I mean, everything he could do to make their life rough, he did, because he didn't want to be there. He wanted to be at home. And it's just how he was. And I told my brothers, I said, once he goes in there, I said, guys, get ready, because he ain't going to make it a year. Because, I mean, my dad was a man's man. And he wasn't going to be locked down and not fight and buck the system and do whatever he could. I mean, he escaped a couple times, whole 9 yards. It's pretty crazy what he did. But I knew he wasn't going to live that long either, because he was going to give up, which he did. So now, when I get the call the last time, the little nurse that had been taking care of him, she and I had kind of built a friendship, because she was the only one that would listen to me when I told her how she could handle my dad. And she told me, she said, we're fixing to send him back to the hospital. I said, yeah, well, he's going to go in there, and in a few days he'll be back out. She said, not this time, James. He had quit taking all of his medicine, all the pills that he had to take since 1979, because when he paralyzed from the chest down, nothing worked. So everything had to be forced to work, basically. I'm not going to go into all that, but it was quite a fucking ordeal for him to even go to the bathroom. So she said, not this time, because he's quit taking any of his medication, won't take it. We can't force him to take it. And basically, she said, I believe he's going to go septic, which when you go septic, it's pretty much game over. So when he's in the hospital, and I get a call from the nurse telling me that he's there, and then I talked to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know, he's probably going to make it a couple weeks. So, you know, everybody needs to start making arrangements. And he didn't make it a couple weeks. But when, you know, I called my younger brother, Gerald, and I said, because him and my dad were estranged for a few years, for quite a while. And I said, if there's anything you got to say to the old man, better go say it. He goes, yeah. You think it's real this time? I said, it's real this time. He's went septic. They're giving him a couple weeks. And I just talked to the nurse today, and she said it ain't. She said it's going to be less than that. So Gerald wanted me to clear the hospital to where none of my other family was around, so he could go say what he needed to say to our dad. And he did. And Stacy asked me, she said, you're going to go? I said, no, I'm not going. And she said, you sure? I said, yeah. I said, he and I had said all the things to each other that we could possibly ever say. And she said, you know, if he goes, you're going to regret this. And I thought about it for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, something like that, and I jumped in my truck and I went over there. This is a hard video, guys. So when I went over to see my dad, I just talked to a girl who just left 15, 20 minutes before I got there. And he said, you know, he talked to him and you know, they had a little bit of a talk and everything was cool. When I went there and talked to him, my dad had his eyes closed. He's breathing real hard. I apologized, told him I did what he told me to do. And I would continue looking out for Mom. He never opened his eyes. He never said anything. I kissed him on the forehead, and I walked out. I got in my truck. I sat there a minute. I was pretty upset. I drove out of the parking lot, and they called and said he passed. So, my mom said all he wanted to do was see all his boys one more time. And at least we went on good terms. But enjoy the time you have with your father. Enjoy the time you have with your mom. Enjoy the time that you have with your family. Because you can see it coming. You can know it's coming. It don't make it any easier. So like the other videos I do that you guys say about what's going on in the world today and all of that, this is probably the most important one. Take care of your families. You guys see I'm all about my family, and I'm always going to be about my family. So take care of your family. Everybody call your father today if you haven't. Even if you're mad at me, if you guys haven't talked, bury that shit now. Because if I hadn't made that trip to that hospital that day, every Father's Day I think about that day. And if I hadn't done that, if it hadn't been for Stacy talking me into doing that, I honestly don't know where I'd be at in my head today when it comes to my father. He's moved on to a better place, and after that day, it put me in a better place. So, no matter what, guys, girls, whatever, no matter what they are, they can be a son of a bitch, they can be an asshole, they can be whatever they be. But at the end of the day, just make sure you make your amends before they pass. Because once they're gone, they're gone. And every time I do this shit with these cars, I think of my dad.